been more than 5 years since Brevard County Commissioners tried to adopt a no-kill policy at shelters in North and South Brevard. My guest today has a progress report on that and explains the latest on feral cat colonies and whether Pitbulls deserve their fearsome reputation. Karla, an attorney, just took the job as Director of Animal Services for Brevard. It's her job to pull together the many volunteers, rescue groups, and animal control officers on whom we must depend to make an ambitious no-kill policy work. Also coming up in the program, Public Interest Curator Alice Garwood has a look at your letters to the editor. Now, my interview with Karla. Karla, I know it's been a big goal of the County Commission to adopt a no-kill approach to its shelters and animal services. Why don't you give us a progress report on where things stand today with that?
I'd love to. We're making great progress. In the last couple of years, the shelter has implemented lots of different programs within the shelter to help adoptions. They've now worked very closely with a volunteer coordinator who uses community volunteers. They're doing off-site adoptions at banks and events and all over the place, anywhere they get invited, which is helping the exposure of the animals from the shelter and also reintroducing the location of the shelter to various citizens so they know where to come if they're interested in a new pet. In addition to the adoptions, we've also changed the hours of the shelters so that it's more convenient for our citizens to come into the shelters. We're open 6 days a week to the public. We're closed on Wednesdays, and the rest of the time we're open from 12 until 6 p.m. So after hours and weekends makes it a lot more convenient for some folks to come in. Also, one of the other proactive actions that we've taken is utilizing our animal enforcement officers out in the field. So these are the individuals that get called when they're stray animals to pick them up. And so what they do is when they're in the field, they try to identify the animal when they pick it up.
Okay.
And to determine if there's an owner and if it's just loose and needs to be returned home before it ever comes into the shelter. So that's made a huge difference in the number of animals actually coming in, and it's also reunified animals with their owners and reduced a lot of stress, we hope, with owners who discover a pet missing.
A dog got out of the yard and where'd it go? They don't know whether it was been picked up by Animal Services or just ran away or
Exactly.
whatever.
I had one this weekend, one of my neighbors, and they found the gate open, had no idea how the gate was open. All the other dogs were there, but the one older one was missing. There was a neighborhood search for that, and after speaking with them, they made a lost report to the animal shelter. And we also have, this community is so fortunate, we have a website here, it's called Brevard Lost Pets.
Okay.
And it's run by Lynn Maraglia. You may know her, y'all have interviewed her before with a nice article in the paper. But what she does is she coordinates with the shelter site, which lists and has photos for most of the stray animals as well as the adoptable animals that are in the shelters. It's on our website, and she will pick up those animals and put them on her website. But also, if you find an animal, you can go on and upload the information where you found it, a photo of that, and that helps reunite people as well if you know to go and look at that website.
Okay.
So we encourage people when they call the shelter reporting a missing animal, go on there and look, and then she'll do her thing, and people find them, lost them, whatever happens, and it reunifies.
What's the name of the site again?
It's called Brevard Lost Pets.
Okay.
And so the websites are another really great addition in this last couple years to make progress with the animals leaving alive in the shelters. And all the adoptable animals are available, so you can go on our website and look and see what you're looking for, if the type of animal, or if you're kind of looking for a little one or a big one or an old one or a young one. Those are some of the kinds of things you can look at, and then if you see something you like, you can come in and take a look at it.
What percentage of animals that come in are live released, or is it are adopted or go back out in some fashion?
Yeah, we keep track. It's called a live release rate.
Okay. And
that's what we're working on in the shelters, and that's what we've been working really hard on this last few years. We want that number to be 90%. Last month, in March of 2013, we were 68.9%. So we're almost 70%. We've got a ways to go, but compared to the numbers from years ago,
right,
we have significantly improved. It has to do with, it's a joint effort from what's going on at the shelters and in animal services to also a big impact of what the community's doing. There are so many animal welfare groups that are at work in our communities doing everything, and one of them is the various rescue groups.
okay,
So there's a lot of rescue groups for single breed animals, maybe dachshunds or pugs or shepherds or labs or something, and we actually have in our shelter environment, we have a staff person who is pretty much dedicated to rescue efforts. And so when animals come in, rescue groups are, cats, dogs, whatever, rescue groups are contacted by our rescue coordinator, and they're made aware that these types of animals are in, and many of them will come and take the animals out. So that's another way they go out alive.
Okay.
So adoptions are one of the ways. Rescue groups take animals and eventually adopt them to families that they find. Owner return, as we talked about a little bit. Some of the animals, because they're maybe not able to be identified in the field, maybe they don't have microchips or they don't have any kind of collar or tag on, so we can't identify them. And our animal services officers can't find an owner or somebody looking for one in the neighborhood they picked the animal up in. Those are also, we'd have reunification attempts once they get there. And a lot of that's through the website and calls made through Brevard Lost Pets or other folks coming in.
How is the crowding situation now at the shelters? When I last wrote about the issue, must have been maybe 2010, 2009, around then, and that was a real problem. I mean, one of the most alarming columns I think I've ever written for some folks started off, we have to kill dogs and cats, because it was just such an unmanageable population back then. Is it still a problem? Yeah,
and I wasn't there at the time, so it's history for me.
Yeah.
But it's a problem because, and that's one of the reasons our efforts have picked up on adoptions and getting these animals out alive, because there are still more animals that come into the shelters than we're currently able to find homes for.
Okay.
That doesn't mean there aren't homes out there, it's just a timing issue. One of the other programs that we're involved in and that our community is involved in and various welfare groups are involved in is spay-neutering programs.
Okay.
Because that's a cornerstone that's going to help us reach that 90% live release rate that we're trying to reach. Is we have got to stop pet overpopulation. And so we have lots of different groups that are making low cost and even no cost at times spay-neuter treatment available, so that the animals can come in and get the procedures, and then we don't have to worry about population from them. And that's a more of a long-term solution, but it's got to be in effect in order for us to be successful.
So every animal that comes out or is adopted out is spayed or neutered?
Absolutely.
Okay.
When someone adopts a pet from the shelters, those pets are either spayed or neutered. They have current vaccines, they have a microchip, and a county tag.
Right. Well, one of the other issues I know that you've been involved with, or at least the Animal Services Department has been involved with in the last couple of weeks or so, has been this issue of feral cat colonies. Your department made some proposals regarding these things. Where do things stand today?
Well, there was a county commission meeting just last week where the proposal that staff brought back at the request of the commission had to do with changing the ordinance for feral cats, because Brevard County has its own ordinance for feral cats.
Okay.
And these are the cats that live in the wild, and maybe not all, but there are many of them that are fed and cared for by people in the community. And many of those people, this is what I was talking about, there's so many people involved, and these people do this their own time, their own money. They take care of these animals and they do what's called TNR, trap, neuter, return.
Okay.
And what they will do is they will trap a cat and have it spayed or neutered and return it to its location. And then these caregivers for these animals that are in certain locations will actually feed them and provide shelter. there's a lot of controversy because of where some of those happen. However, this is another thing that our department's been working very hard on with the community groups, with neighbors, with friends, and neighborhoods. We've involved Alley Cat Allies, which is a national organization, to help us learn to educate others on the proper feral cat management in a community. So what the discussion was mostly last week was about these feral cat colonies in parks.
Okay.
So on county property. So the Commission's long-term wish is that these animals will not be in county parks or on the beaches. There are some established colonies of these that are being cared for at this time. Okay. So what they've done is ask animal service staff to work with the caregivers to try and reduce or relocate these colonies in a reasonable period of time.
Do any of these colonies ever shrink? It seems like they don't. I mean, some of them, if they were all neutered and captured and returned, you'd think that they would eventually, over 10 or 12 years, sort of wither down. But it seems like they're there a long time.
Well, and that is the case, and actually some of the information we got for the County Commission to consider when they were discussing this issue was from some of the caregivers. Okay. And it turns out that many of the properly managed colonies, and that seems to be a key, that properly managed, those do in fact reduce. But what we see is that some areas are more popular for dumping. Oh. And that's what some of the caregivers tell us with regards to new cats that show up in their neighborhoods or wherever they're taking care of cats. And it turns out that parks and areas like that are very popular for dumping. So while some of the most cared for colonies have reduced, and we have some information, we provided the Commission some numbers with that regard, there are others that have grown for various reasons. One of the reasons that was cited in the past couple of years was actually, and this affected the shelter animals as well, is our economic situation here, where people were moving out of the area perhaps, and they were leaving their animals behind. So if, you know, a well-fed cat who's a pet is now turned out, they're going to go somewhere where they can eat. And so, you know, it turns out that some of these areas with the cats in them, they have some friendly cats and some wild cats, you know, some that you can actually pet. Many of those, the caregivers will take those and adopt them out. They'll do their best that way, so that it truly is just the wild ones that are outside.
I can imagine a lot of people just from some homes that were foreclosed upon would just pack up and move and leave the cat behind if they were outdoor cats.
Absolutely. That happened a lot.
We'll have more of my interview with Brevard Animal Services Director Karla Torben coming up in just a moment. Now, here's Alice Garwood with your letters to the editor.
A number of readers weighed in after Brevard County Commissioners recently asked county staffers to prepare strict rules governing feral cat colonies, including banning them on beaches and in parks. Greg Eddy writes, "It's time to regulate the people who are creating the problem. The cats didn't ask for this." Vanessa Moore agrees. "No, they don't. They need to make owners responsible for their pets. The biggest part of taking care of this issue is to fix your pet, regardless of whether it's a cat or dog." Glenn Aaron says animal control rules should be enforced equally for dogs and cats. He writes, "When my dog gets out and runs around, animal control is notified. The dog is caught and taken to the shelter, and I have to go through a hassle to get him back. Why are cats any different? If dogs can't run loose, neither should cats. Trap the cats." I'm Alice Garwood, Public Interest Curator for Florida Today. Remember, you can send us your comments on this issue or others in Florida Today. Just turn on your cell phone camera, turn it towards yourself, and give us your best take on the issue in 30 seconds or less. Email your letters or video clip to letters@floridatoday.com.
Thanks, Alice. Now let's hear more from Karla Torben about challenges and solutions for Brevard County Animal Services. Now you have an interesting background. You were an attorney
Yes.
for a number of years and then got into and applied for the Animal Services Department. Why? What could draw you to this type of job?
You know, I had a law practice here in Sentry for many years with partners, and it was a great career. It worked. I've always loved animals. I've always wanted to do something with animals. I've been involved with, you know, from a distance with Best Friends Animal Society. Many people who know animals are familiar with that out in Utah. And they're just, you know, my pets have been, many of them have been rescue pets, and when you get involved, you just want to do something. And so this was, my business practice was changing a bit, and this was just an opportunity for me. It was something that I feel like my whole life I've been a problem solver in my work life, and that's what Animal Services is as well. We're problem solvers. We help people with their pets, and we're helping this community with the pet situation.
Well, good luck with that. One of the things that we were talking about before the program, and I wanted to ask you about this on the air, is it seems like one of the biggest challenges at, I don't want to call it the pound, the shelter, is how many pit bull mix dogs come in, and people, are they harder to adopt out than other breeds? What's the situation there?
Yeah, there are a lot of pits and pit mixes in this area, and it turns out that they are a little bit more difficult to adopt out. Some of the other pure breeds, the little dogs, even the bigger purebred dogs, those are the ones that are first to go when adopters come in. Some of it is because of the size, you know, so even if it looks like more like a lab, but it might have something that somebody say, oh, that's a pit mix. Because they're bigger, there's apartments that don't allow them, rentals that don't allow them. And some, you know, if it just looks, anything about it as pit, there's some people just say no. People tell us that they have issues with homeowners insurance with pit bulls that they may not have with some other breeds. They've kind of got a bad rap over the years, and they're, you know, I think if you looked around, you'll see that there's people who own pit bulls, love those pit bulls, and they're great dogs when they're trained and properly trained, and also have responsible owners.
How do you judge a dog that's at the shelter, though? I mean, how do you know what its temperament and its background is like to know whether it's an appropriate dog to adopt out?
Well, we never know for sure on any dog, but what happens is when the animals come into the shelter, there's a lot of back and forth with our staff, you know, from the time they come in. And many animals are scared to death. And actually, you know, when they come in, because there have been, maybe if they were strays running in the streets, so now they're lost, they don't have the comfort of their home or their surroundings, and they're taken. Some dogs, you know, don't care. They're just wherever they're happy. Most dogs find, you know, when they're shoved in a cage and brought into some place where they're completely unfamiliar, most dogs, it's a very stressful environment. Sometimes, you know, our staff can't really even do much with them for a couple of days. But once they understand that they're okay, they're being fed, and nobody's hurting them, then if they're not already friendly and approachable, many of them become that way. We have a lot of volunteers, I mentioned earlier, that come in and help us at the shelter. And so in addition to staff dealing with these animals, between feeding them and cleaning their kennels and taking care of them from a medical standpoint, they have a lot of interaction with them. So if there are issues, though, you know, everybody knows, you know, and there are warnings up with this animal. So sometimes those are the animals that go out into foster homes, and that's something we haven't yet talked about, but this is another way that's helping us adopt out more animals. We actually have people in the community that serve as foster homes, and so they will take some animals. Usually it's sometimes it's a medical condition or a behavioral issue, and so sometimes when an animal is stressed in the shelter and may not be the best animal, it might not be something that anybody's ever going to want to take home with them, then we try to get them out of that environment into a foster home, and then that individual who is usually familiar with dogs, has been around dogs, that person can make a better evaluation about, hey, this is a great dog. It's just a situational issue where he seems either very fearful or aggressive. I mean, there are those dogs too that are aggressive that aren't adoptable, and that we, through the team, the staff team that is evaluating over a period, sometimes they do make a determination that we don't think that's a dog we want on adoption row, because it may not be proper to go home to a family. But we never know for sure. You do the best you can.
Right. So the idea that there will always be some animals that are not appropriate to adopt out, so the idea that you would be 100% no-kill at some point probably isn't realistic, but you're not doing it as a matter of course. You're making every effort to see if there's any animal that can be adopted is. Is that the goal?
That's the goal, absolutely. And we are what is known as an open admission shelter. So you're right, it would be difficult for us to have 100% live release rate. And open admissions, we're run by the county government, and we take anything in. Okay. There are also in the community, we have no-kill shelters, so that the animals that come in there, and those are some of our community partners, Central Brevard Humane Society and the Titusville SPCA. Those are no-kill facilities, so the animals that come in there, they're going to find them homes. Okay. And actually, I said partnership because they get a lot of their animals from our shelters. So they're one of the rescue groups. As they need animals, they will come and pick out animals from our adoption row. So those are live release rates from us, and we know once they get them, they're going to end up in forever homes. There's another program you probably have heard of as well. It's called Paws and Stripes.
I've heard of it.
It's a great program. We work with the Sheriff's Department, and they come and pick out animals to go and live and train with inmates. Okay. And usually the program, they get animals from all the facilities. They get them from SPCA, from our North Shelter, from the South Shelter, and also the Humane Society. And they work, I believe, I'm not sure if it's 6 or 8 weeks. They will work and live with some of the people in the jail system, and they train those dogs, and those dogs all get adopted, and most of them are adopted before the program is complete. Okay. If they're not, they're guaranteed to go back and until a forever home is found for them, they're safe. So
the inmates are training the dogs in obedience and that kind of thing? Right. They've got the time, right? They can spend.
Right, and right, and they love it. It's good.
And does it affect them in return? Does it affect the inmates somehow, or?
I haven't had the opportunity to actually speak with them, so everything I've heard, absolutely though. There was a graduation, and they have a graduation ceremony for the animals, and many times the new adoptive families are there, as well as the inmate and the dogs, and it's actually a very emotional proceeding, because the inmates have grown so close to the animals, right. And now they're watching them go to their new family. So as happy as the new family is, it's emotional.
Well, it also probably brings out it gives them something to make their time worthwhile. It gives them more meaning. They're giving an animal health and a new lease on life. So that's got to be a positive to them.
Absolutely. Yeah.
What is it about animal people that makes it different? I mean, I don't envy you the politics, but it just, you've said a couple of things thus far about how important it is to reach out and keep people in the loop and work with volunteers. How would you characterize the relationship right now with volunteers in the animal community, between the county and those people?
Well, I think we're making great strides. And we've got, everything is good. It can be better. Okay. And that's what we're working on. There are so many animal welfare groups in our community doing lots of great things that nobody knows about. They're not out there. Most people are operating on either a shoestring budget or out of their pocket budget, where they're paying for anything that happens because they care so much. So there are so many caring people that we don't even know about. So what we're trying to do is discover them and talk and interact and network with them, so that because we all know we're working for the same things. We're working for the animals. And if we can work together to make all of us more successful, that's our goal. And it's going to take all of us in this community to make our goal of 90% release rate happen.
Do you have enough volunteers?
We do. Well, we can always use more volunteers. We have, I think our volunteer coordinator reported last week that she has about 600 and some odd people.
Oh, wow.
That have volunteered. And they come in all different kinds. We have, you need to be 16 or above to volunteer at the shelter. But people come, you know, for a few hours a week. There's some that come daily. There's some that come for dog walking. There's some that help clean out the cat kennels. There's some that come and take photos of the animals so we can upload and have a better, more, you know, more pleasurable photo to look at where an animal's having fun. There's something to do for everyone. There's some that do paperwork, and there's some that simply come to help us at adoption events, so they'll show up and take a dog to an adoption event. So we use them for everything, and we can never have too many.
Karla Torben, thank you so much for joining us here today.
Thank you.
Well, that's our program. Remember to comment on the interview or anything you read in Florida Today. Send us an email of 200 words or less to letters@floridatoday.com. We'll see you right here next Wednesday on WBCC and floridatoday.com.